I was 31 when my world was turned upside down. For years, I had carefully built my life with discipline, intelligence, and quiet resilience. I inherited a modest piece of land. From my late father, a peaceful ranch surrounded by oak, trees, and golden fields that carried decades of family memories. It wasn't just property. It was a symbol of my lineage, my father's love, and the sacrifices of generations. After my marriage to Adrian, a charming yet calculating businessman, I believed I had found a partner who valued not just me, but also my heritage. For a while, everything seemed picture perfect. We hosted elegant dinners at the ranch, planned business ventures together, and presented ourselves as the ideal power couple. What I didn't realize then was that beneath his polished exterior, Adrian's admiration was never for me. It was for what I owned. When my father passed away, the inheritance came directly to me. Every acre, every horse, every dusty wooden beam of the barn was legally mine. Adrian insisted we modernize the ranch, pouring money into renovations, expanding business connections, and using my assets as leverage for his deals. Naively, I thought it was teamwork. In reality, he was carefully weaving a narrative that he was the architect of our fortune. Slowly, he shifted conversations with friends and business partners, casually dropping phrases like, "When I built this place," or "I turned her land into gold." At first, I laughed it off, thinking he was just being dramatic. But over time, those words became bricks in a wall he was constructing, one that would eventually be used against me. Our marriage began to deteriorate when I discovered he had quietly opened a separate account, funneling money from joint ventures into his name. He also started meeting potential investors behind my back, presenting himself as the sole decision maker. I confronted him one evening in the library, surrounded by my father's old law books. "Adrian," I said calmly, "why are you hiding financial documents from me?" He gave me a cold smile. "Diana, you wouldn't understand the complexities of business. Let me handle things." That night, for the first time, I saw not my husband, but a rival. Someone who didn't see me as a partner, but as a stepping stone. The breaking point came a few months later when I found messages on his phone from a woman, not just flirtatious words, but detailed discussions about how, once the ranch was legally theirs, they would sell everything and move abroad. My hands trembled, but I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I started preparing silently. I hired a discreet legal team, unearthed every contract, every transfer, every misleading statement he'd ever made. I even found proof that some of the renovation invoices he'd presented were fake, with funds redirected into his offshore accounts. Piece by piece, I built a quiet fortress of evidence. Then came the divorce filing. Adrian walked into the courtroom as if he had already won. He had hired one of the most expensive legal teams in the city, men in sharp suits who smirked with the confidence of people who believed money could rewrite truth. During the opening arguments, he stood up dramatically and said, "Your Honor, I built everything she has. The ranch, the wealth, the status, all of it exists because of me. I deserve half of her fortune and full management rights of the ranch." The gallery murmured. Some nodded sympathetically. They had all heard his version of the story for years. It was polished, convincing, and rehearsed. I sat there, wearing a simple ivory suit, hands folded calmly on the table. My attorney whispered, "Are you ready?" I nodded. I had spent months playing a quiet game of chess, and now it was time to make the first move. Everyone expected me to react emotionally, to argue, to cry, to break under his accusations. But I remained still, like a calm ocean before a storm. Because what Adrian didn't know was that the narrative he'd spent years constructing was about to shatter in a single moment. The judge looked at me and asked if I wished to respond to Adrian's claims. I slowly stood up, walked to the bench, and slid a sleek black folder across. "Your Honor," I said softly but firmly, "before any assumptions are made, I believe this will clarify who built what." Inside that folder were financial records, signed contracts, transfer receipts, and even notarized statements from contractors proving the ownership of every renovation, every business deal, and every cent that had ever passed through our ventures. But that wasn't all. Hidden within the folder was a legal clause from my father's will that Adrian had conveniently forgotten. The ranch could never be transferred to a non-blood relative without severe legal consequences, including forfeiture of any claims to the estate. The judge's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the documents. Adrian's confident posture began to falter. He shifted in his seat, whispering to his lawyers. The gallery fell silent. For the first time, the power dynamic shifted. This wasn't the naive wife he thought he could outplay. This was a woman who had patiently prepared her revenge with precision. As I returned to my seat, I caught Adrian's eyes. They no longer held arrogance, they held a flicker of fear, and I knew this was only the beginning. The day after the courtroom session, the air around Adrian shifted like a storm cloud trying to disguise itself as a breeze. Outwardly, he continued his bravado, making loud statements to anyone who would listen, claiming my evidence was a distraction and easily explainable. But behind his confident mask, I saw the tightening jaw, the forced laughter, the slight tremor in his hand when he picked up a glass. He wasn't unraveling publicly, not yet, but internally. The carefully crafted empire of lies he'd built was starting to crack. My legal team and I spent the following weeks meticulously tightening every legal knot. Adrian's lawyers tried to delay the hearings, hoping to find loopholes or intimidate me into a settlement. They sent letters offering millions if I'd share the ranch or allow him partial control, but I didn't bite. My replies were polite, firm, and emotionless. Every interaction with him from that point on was a chess move. One morning, I received an unexpected call from a contractor who had worked on the ranch years earlier. "Mrs. Diana," he said hesitantly, "I don't know if I should say this, but Adrian offered me cash to lie in court. He wanted me to say he financed the renovations." My pulse slowed as a cold. Clarity washed over me. "Did you agree?" I asked softly. "No, ma'am. I have my original receipts. He never paid a dime." That testimony became another weapon quietly, added to my arsenal. Meanwhile, Adrian began to face the consequences of his arrogance. Investors who had once believed in his smooth talk started backing out when whispers of legal fraud reached their ears. Banks delayed approving his new business proposals. The mistress he had secretly planned a future with stopped answering. His calls after realizing his big win wasn't as guaranteed as he'd promised. For the first time, Adrian was standing on unstable ground, and he didn't even realize. I was the one quietly loosening the bolts beneath him. The second major court session arrived. The courtroom was fuller this time. Journalists, curious acquaintances, and a few family members had shown up. Adrian walked in wearing a designer suit, but his posture betrayed him. Gone was the unshakable arrogance. In its place was a man trying desperately to control a narrative slipping through his fingers. His lawyers presented their arguments, claiming he had significantly contributed to the growth of the ranch. They displayed photographs, invoices, and speeches. But every single piece of evidence they put forward, I had already dissected and countered. When it was my turn, my lawyer calmly presented bank statements, notarized testimonies, and even voice recordings Adrian had carelessly left on a shared business line. Recordings where he referred to using the ranch's value to build my own empire. Every sentence became a nail sealing his claims shut. But my favorite moment came when the judge brought up the clause from my father's will again. Adrian's team tried to downplay it, calling it an outdated family tradition. The judge leaned forward, voice sharp. "This isn't tradition. This is legally binding. Mr. Adrian, were you aware of this clause?" He stammered. I was told it wasn't relevant anymore." "By whom?" Silence. His lawyers glanced at each other, realizing he'd just admitted he knew about the clause, but chose to ignore it. A ripple of murmurs spread across the courtroom. As the session closed, the judge announced a temporary injunction preventing Adrian from making any financial claims on the ranch or related assets until the final verdict. This was a massive blow. He had counted on using my inheritance as collateral for his next business venture. Without it, his entire financial structure began to collapse. Outside the courthouse, I walked past him without a glance. He called after me, voice low but strained. "Diana, we can still settle. You're making a mistake if you push me." I turned slightly, my voice calm and steady. "No, Adrian, you made the mistake when you underestimated me." In the weeks that followed, the psychological shift deepened. Adrian tried different tactics, late-night calls, emotional voicemails, even attempts to reach out through mutual friends, painting himself as a man betrayed by greed. But the truth was slowly spreading. People began to see through his charm. His image as the brilliant businessman was fading, replaced by whispers of fraud, manipulation, and greed. One evening, as I sat in my study overlooking the moonlit ranch, I realized something profound. My revenge wasn't just about winning in court. It was about dismantling the illusion he had built so carefully. Every time his schemes backfired, every time someone who once admired him turned away, he tasted a small dose of the humiliation he had planned for me. And then came the financial storm. Adrian's overseas accounts were flagged for suspicious activity due to evidence my legal team had forwarded to financial regulators. One by one, his assets were frozen pending investigation. Deals he'd been counting on were canceled overnight. Investors filed lawsuits. His name began appearing in business gossip columns, not as a visionary, but as a man facing legal ruin. He showed up at my gate one night, disheveled and furious. "Diana, you're destroying me," he shouted. I stepped out calmly, wrapped in a long wool coat, holding a cup of tea as if his rage were nothing more than distant thunder. "No, Adrian," I said softly. "You destroyed yourself the moment you tried to take what was never yours." The security guards escorted him off the property as he screamed threats that echoed into the cold night. I watched him leave, not with anger, but with an almost detached satisfaction. For years, he had thought he held the power in our marriage, manipulating, twisting stories, controlling narratives. Now he was the one trapped in the story I had written for him, and the final act was yet to come. The final court hearing arrived on a crisp winter morning, the kind of morning where the air carries both tension and clarity. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters huddled together, and whispers spread like wildfire. Adrian's downfall had become the talk of the city. Business magazines that once glorified his visionary leadership now printed headlines about fraud allegations, frozen accounts, and suspicious offshore dealings. But Adrian still walked into the building wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, forcing a confident smile, the smile of a man desperately clinging to his fading mask. I arrived moments later, dressed simply but sharply, exuding calm. There was no entourage, no theatrics. I didn't need them. The silence that surrounded me was louder than any statement Adrian could make. When our eyes met across the hallway, his gaze flickered just for a second, betraying the panic buried beneath the surface. Inside the courtroom, the judge wasted no time. Over the past months, both sides had presented their arguments, evidence and testimonies, but today was different. Today wasn't about claims or counterclaims. Today was about truth. Adrian's lawyers gave their final arguments, trying to spin his actions as misunderstood ambition, portraying him as a man who had simply wanted to secure his future. Their words were elegant but hollow. Everyone in that room, from the judge to the spectators, could sense it. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, holding a slim folder. "Your Honor," I began, my voice calm and unwavering. "For years, Adrian claimed he built my life. He demanded millions and my father's ranch, believing the truth could be buried under his confidence. But the truth has a way of resurfacing, quietly, then all at once." I handed the judge the folder. Inside were two final pieces of evidence no one, not even Adrian, knew I had. The first was a notarized confession from his former financial advisor, who had decided to cooperate with authorities to save himself. It detailed Adrian's secret offshore dealings, fraudulent statements, and illegal attempts to transfer ownership of parts of the ranch under a shell company. The second was a series of recorded phone calls between Adrian and his mistress, where he not only mocked my intelligence, but laid out his plan to strip Diana of everything, sell it all, and disappear. As the recordings played in court, Adrian's carefully built image shattered like glass. His voice echoed through the speakers, arrogant, cruel, self-assured. Gas filled the courtroom. Journalists scribbled frantically. His lawyers froze, realizing they'd been blindsided. Adrian's face drained of color. He tried to interrupt, shouting, "These recordings are taken out of context." The judge silenced him sharply. "Mr. Adrian, you will remain quiet." For the first time, he was no longer the man controlling the narrative. He was a man exposed, naked in the light of truth. The judge reviewed everything quietly, then removed his glasses. His words were deliberate and heavy. "Mr. Adrian, this court finds your claims not only unfounded, but deceitful. All financial claims against Mrs. Diana are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, due to evidence of fraud, perjury, and attempted unlawful transfer of property, this case will be forwarded to the relevant authorities for criminal investigation." A murmur spread through the room. Adrian's knees seemed to buckle slightly, his hand gripping the table for balance. His lawyers avoided eye contact with him entirely. I remained still, watching with the calm detachment of someone who had already envisioned this moment countless times. But I wasn't finished. As we exited the courtroom, a crowd of reporters surged forward. Adrian attempted to walk quickly, but the barrage of microphones and flashbulbs slowed him down. "Adrian, is it true you committed fraud? Adrian, are you going to prison? Adrian, what do you have to say about the recordings?" I walked out behind him, paused on the courthouse steps, and faced the cameras. I didn't need to say much. Just one simple, elegant sentence. Truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. That line hit the evening news in every major outlet. Within days, Adrian's empire crumbled completely. Investors withdrew, business partners sued, the mistress disappeared from his life entirely. His accounts remained frozen, and a criminal case was opened. His name, once respected, became synonymous with betrayal and greed. A few weeks later, as winter slowly softened, Adrian showed up at the ranch. This time, he wasn't in a suit. He looked smaller, his confidence stripped away. "Diana," he said weakly, "I have nowhere else to go. The house, my accounts, everything is gone. I just need a place to stay, just until I fix this." I stood at the gate, wrapped in a long coat, hands tucked into my pockets. The same ranch he had once tried to steal now stood behind me, strong, unshaken. My voice was soft but firm. "Adrian, the woman you underestimated built this life. And the man who claimed he built it destroyed himself. There's no place for you here anymore." For a long moment, we just stood there, him outside the gate, me inside. And then I turned and walked away as the gate slowly closed between us. That sound, the iron clicking shut, was the real ending of our story. Months later, I would sometimes drive past him on the street. He walked while I passed by in my car. The roles reversed from how he once boasted about his power. There was no hatred left in me, just a quiet satisfaction. He had written the first chapters of this story with arrogance. I had written the ending with precision. And the world remembered my version.